Hey guys, tonight we're taking a soft, sandy stroll into ancient Nubia sun-bleached kingdom, nestled just south of Egypt, where the river Nile flows like a lazy thread through stone and time. You stand barefoot in the dirt, the heat of the day still clinging to the ground. Around you, huts of mud brick cluster together like sleepy cattle, and somewhere off in the distance, a goat sneezes. Your stomach's quiet, your mind's gentle, and the biggest mystery tonight isn't royal wars or pyramid building, it's how on earth these people, who lived thousands of years ago, had teeth so healthy that modern dentists would weep with jealousy. Yes, you heard that right. Despite lacking fluoride toothpaste, floss, electric toothbrushes, or Instagram ads warning about enamel damage, the average Nubian's smile was impressively intact. And meanwhile, you've probably chipped a molar on a popcorn kernel and blamed it on bad genetics. But guess what? You probably wouldn't survive their daily diet or their version of toothpaste, which we'll get to. And no, you're not going to like it. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there are. You winding down at 11 p.m. in Toronto, or wide awake at 4 a.m. in Karachi. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You blink slowly in the golden hush of Nubia. The sun is dipping toward the western cliffs, painting the sandstone walls in syrupy orange. A boy walks past you barefoot, balancing a clay jar on his head with the same ease you scroll your phone. He smiles, bright white teeth flashing beneath the veil of desert dust. And somehow, despite the absence of modern dental miracles, he's got molars smoother than yours. The secret? Well, it's not really just one thing. It's everything. The environment, the diet, the rituals, the weird stuff they chewed on. Even the way their flour was ground spoiler. It's very sandy. But let's start with a big picture. Nubia, as a region, was harsh but fertile. Carved by the Nile and cradled by gold-filled hills, it was both isolated and wildly influential. For much of antiquity, it was an independent powerhouse rich in resources and culture. And despite the sandy climate and the tough life, the archaeological record has shown one unexpected thing. Their teeth were usually in great shape, better, in fact, than most of their contemporaries, Egyptians included. You might be standing next to a burial site now, not in a creepy way, more in a wow, this is beautifully preserved kind of way. An archaeologist brushes soil from a jawbone that's been resting here for 2,000 years. And as the dust lifts, so does the secret. Nearly every tooth still, rooted in the skull, intact, uninfected. What we know today comes from excavations across the region, especially at sites like Kerma, Meru, and Napata. From elite tombs to humble graves, teeth have a habit of outlasting the rest of us, and Nubian teeth in particular. They tell a story of surprisingly robust health. Now, here's the cheeky twist. While their smiles were mostly cavity-free, they weren't perfect. Many Nubians had worn down teeth from years of eating gritty bread and unprocessed grains, but the wear was natural and gradual. And crucially, it didn't often lead to abscesses or decay like it does today. It's sort of like driving a car every day on dusty roads. Sure, the tires wear out, but they don't explode. They age gracefully. Meanwhile, your modern mouth is like a sports car stuck in traffic, fed junk fuel and subject to mystery warning lights. You pretend you don't see dot. And what about kids? Even their milk teeth fared decently. Unlike today's rising tide of childhood. Cavities, hello gummy bears, Nubian children weren't sipping juice boxes or sneaking lollipops. Their food was unrefined, yes, but also low in sugar and high in fiber, which meant their developing mouths had a fighting chance. Historians still argue whether this was the result of clever cultural practices, or just the lucky coincidence of geography and diet. Some think Nubians may have used rudimentary forms of dental care passed down orally, pun intended. Others think the lack of processed sugar and dairy played the biggest role. Still others point to the mineral content of their water, or even the grinding stones used in their daily cooking. But before we dig too deep, not with a dental drill, don't worry. Let's take a moment to really appreciate this. Here was a civilization where people were battling crocodiles, bartering with gold, and surviving floods, yet their teeth were thriving. No fluoride treatments, no coconut oil pulling, no LED whitening kits, just sun, stone, and sesame cakes ground with elbow grease. Somehow, your ancestors from Nubia smiled through it all. And as you sit beside that ancient hearth, the stars beginning to pinprick the sky above, you lean back in the cool dust and wonder what other secrets their mouths carried, what they whispered, what they sang, what they held tight behind closed lips. Your modern dental floss may be mighty fresh, but these folks had something more elemental. And trust me, by the end of this story, you'll want to trade in your electric toothbrush for a certain sacred stick that grows wild along the Nile. You shift slightly in the warm Nubian sand, the scent of sun-baked earth still rising faintly. Around you, a low wind stirs the edge of your linen wrapwell. It's imaginary linen, but go with it and your gaze settles on a woman kneeling beside a flat grinding stone. Her hands move rhythmically, almost hypnotically, as she grinds dried sorghum into flour using a smooth oblong rock. You watch the grains break down grain against stone, stone against grain until it all becomes one fine, dusty powder. Except not all that fine. Not really. C. This isn't your store-bought flour that puffs out of a paper bag in some climate-controlled bakery aisle. This is flour that's crunchy, gritty, flour that still carries traces of the granite it was ground on. And this, oddly enough, may have been one of the keys to Nubians' dental health. Ancient Nubians, like their neighbors in Egypt and further south along the Nile, made heavy use of grinding stones, querns, and mortar. If you're feeling archaeological tonight, they crushed and milled grain manually every single day. But over time, those stones wore down too, and tiny fragments broke off and got into the flour, which meant that every loaf of bread, every handful of porridge, came with a complimentary helping of mineral grit, kind of like chewing on the beach. Daily dot. Now, you'd think this would be terrible for your teeth, and in some ways, you'd be right. Constant exposure to sand and stone particles wore their enamel down. Nubian skulls from the region show significant tooth wear, sometimes right down to the dentin. Picture molars ground flat like little stone stumps. Not exactly your Hollywood smile. And here's the twist. This abrasion may have actually helped prevent cavities. The grit acted like natural exfoliant for your teeth, constantly polishing and scrubbing away the bacterial plaque that would otherwise have taken up cozy residence in your mouth. It's kind of like having an endless supply of built-in toothpaste, minus the spearmint flavor. Historians still argue whether this constant abrasion was more helpful than harmful. Some believe it was merely the lesser of two evils. Better to wear down your teeth slowly than to let bacteria rot them from the inside. Others suspect the gritty diet acted like a crude but effective cleansing mechanism that kept infection at bay. Either way, it's safe to say that their teeth may have hurt less than yours during tax season. And let's talk about that. Bread Nubians consumed a variety of flatbreads, often made from sorghum, millet, or barley. No yeast, no leavening, no soft white pillows of sandwich bread. Their loaves were coarse, heavy, and dry. You'd need strong teeth just to break a piece off, let alone chew it. But this meant less sugar, less sticking to molars, and less acidity inside the mouth conditions under which modern cavities would normally thrive. Also, fiber, loads of it. The Nubian diet was high in tough, fibrous grains and plants, which stimulated saliva production. And saliva, as it turns out, is your body's own built-in defense system for your mouth. It rinses, balances pH, and starts digestion all while keeping bacterial populations in check. Compare that to your Friday night bag of potato chips and soda combo, which leaves your mouth a war zone of sugar, starch, and regret. You glance over to a teenage boy crouched beside the grinding woman. He's working on kneading a rough dough with water and a bit of salt. His hands are dusty, his teeth a little worn, but they're strong, resilient. His gums don't bleed. His breath, neutral. No mint, no rot, just breath. It's disturbingly wholesome. Another overlooked factor, the absence of processed foods. Ancient Nubians didn't consume anything remotely close to what you'd call junk food. No artificial sweeteners, no gooey caramels that weld themselves to your molars like dental cement. Their food was hard, coarse, and had to be worked through, giving their jaws a workout and minimizing sticky residue. The bacteria responsible for cavities, especially Streptococcus mutans, just didn't thrive in this kind of biome. And here's the fringe tidbit. Some researchers believe the act of constantly chewing such tough, fibrous foods contributed to stronger facial bones and wider dental arches, meaning their teeth had more room to grow straight and settle comfortably, unlike your crowded modern mouth, which is why you needed braces in middle school and still wear a retainer, you pretend. Not to lose. Weirdly enough, there's even some evidence that their harder bread may have functioned like rudimentary floss. The coarse texture could scrape along the gaps between teeth during chewing, dislodging bits of food and discouraging plaque. It's the ancient equivalent of biting into a bagel and cleaning your teeth at the same time. Of course, it wasn't all perfect. Severe tooth wear could expose nerves, leading to pain and sensitivity. But when you compare that to the epidemic of tooth decay in modern, industrial societies, among young children it becomes clear. Nubians had less to suffer overall when it came to their dental destiny. So, there you are, nestled in the Nubian, dusk, watching these old culinary customs unfold like clockwork. And as the grinding stones keep rhythm and the fire crackles nearby, you can almost taste the earthy taints of ancient bread. Dry, dusty, dense. Not great with butter, but better. For your enamel, you lick your lips, a bit thirsty now, and wonder what they drank to wash it all down. But don't worry, we'll get there. For now, just chew slowly, think sandy thoughts, and let your jaw do the dreaming. You're still sitting in the fading light of that ancient Nubian village, your fingers brushing against the coarse crust of a sun-baked flatbread when you notice something strange. There's no sugar anywhere, no honey jars tucked into baskets, no candied dates. Not even a ceramic cup of sweet tea. You squint toward the small open-air pantry, and sure enough, nothing sugary in sight. And that, believe it or not, 'tis a major reason your ancient neighbors tear teeth that could put yours to shame. See, the Nubian diet, like many in early agrarian societies, was blissfully low in sugar, not the natural kind found in fruits or vegetables. Those were still around, but the refined, sneaky, enamel-eroding kinds that fuel your midnight snack binges and turn innocent lollipops into dental time bombs. The Nubians never knew cane, sugar, no crystalline grains, no chocolate, no caramel drizzle, nothing to stick in the crevices of their molars and whisper, "I brought bacteria." That meant their mouths were basically battlegrounds where bacteria just never got there. Reinforcements. You're used to feeding your oral enemies with each cookie, soda, and fancy coffee order. They had no such enemies, or at least not the ones powered by high fructose corn syrup. You might even envy them a little. Okay, a lot. Historians still argue whether Nubians understood the connection between diet and dental health. Some suggest they lucked into good habits by necessity. You don't have access to refined sugar. You can't rot your teeth with it. Others think it was cultural moderation. Either way, they didn't snack. No one was pouring chocolate syrup over porridge, or shoving toffees into their cheeks. Sugar was as rare as a dentist's drill. And that's a good thing, because drills hadn't been invented yet. Instead, their meals were built around complex carbs, whole grains, lentils, seeds, and fibrous vegetables. They might gnaw on dried dates or figs now and then, but even those were eaten in moderation and without sticky, clingy, processed sugar, there was far less acid erosion. You can almost hear your molars sigh with envy. There's also something weirdly charming about their restraint. Imagine a Nubian child sitting cross-legged near the fire, chewing slowly on a roasted barley cake. No sugar high, no tantrum after a juice box. Just quiet satisfaction and strong teeth to match. You glance down at your imaginary Nubian hands. Your breath is clean, your teeth blessedly quiet. You haven't felt a cavity since you arrived in this place. Now here comes the fringe tidbit. Researchers have found very few signs of childhood tooth decay in Nubian skeletal remains. In fact, decay across all age groups is staggeringly rare, especially when compared to populations that had access to honey, syrup, or fruit preserves. Some scholars believe this was due to a high-fiber diet counteracting the little sugar they did consume, sweeping away residue and stimulating saliva. Others think it might have been genetic, but those same genes don't seem to have saved neighboring cultures who did indulge in sweets. Another thing to consider: Nubian fermentation practices. They brewed a kind of thick, porridge-like beer, the kind that sparkles and fizzes in pint glasses today, but a more nutritious, bready drink that was high in vitamins and relatively low in sugar. It was a staple, often consumed by all ages, and while it wasn't kind to the liver, it didn't hurt the teeth. Now, before you go romanticizing all this into some paleo-keto fusion fantasy, let's remember, life in ancient Nubia wasn't easy. People worked hard. They aged fast. Disease and injury were constant threats. But somehow, even through all that, their mouths endured. They weren't being rinsed with antiseptic mouthwash, but they weren't being drowned in Coca-Cola either. And remember that smile you saw earlier, the flash of white teeth from the barefoot boy? That was earned through a life of chewing hard food, drinking mineral-rich water, and never knowing the tragic beauty of a glazed donut. His gums don't know what inflammation feels like. His teeth, though ground down by 1,000 meals, are still whole, still rooted, not perfect, but peaceful. There's something deeply restful in that thought, that dental health could come not from fighting bacteria every morning and night with expensive gadgets and peppermint foam, but simply by eating naturally. That moderation and simplicity, those dusty grains and bitter greens, could protect what most of us lose to sweet indulgence. Of course, there's a soft debate still simmering in academic circles. Did their low-sugar lifestyle prevent cavities entirely, or did we just get lucky with the preserved remains we've found? Were there hidden rituals, long forgotten, that supplemented their oral health in ways we haven't yet uncovered? Maybe they rinsed with herbal tinctures. Maybe they knew which leaves calmed inflammation. Maybe they simply didn't eat dessert after every meal. Still, the evidence tilts heavily toward this ancient Nubians were nearly sugar-free, and their teeth thank them for it. Yours would too, if you gave them the same courtesy. But alas, Tomorrow, you'll probably chase your breakfast eggs with syrup-drenched pancakes and call it balance. For now, though, let that thought dissolve like sugar in tea. Spree, be easy. You're in a world where dessert doesn't exist, where enamel erosion is barely a whisper, and where even the sweetest smile doesn't come with a cavity. You lie back against the soft slope of a Nubian dune, feeling the last warmth of the day cooling off your skin. Somewhere nearby, a pot of grain beer simmers, and you realize, not for the first time tonight, how peaceful it feels to live in a world without candy. The night deepens around you, but in Nubia, life doesn't stop just because the sun ducks. Behind the cliffs, somewhere nearby, a clay pot cracks gently over the fire. Someone is stirring lentils, their wooden spoon tapping the rim in a slow rhythm. And you, still lounging in that memory-soft sand, start to notice something else. Everyone's chewing. A lot, constantly. Chewing as if their jaws were born to move. Because they were docked in the ancient Nubian world, your jaw didn't just open and close to make room for food. It was an essential machine, a daily engine. Every meal required effort. Every bite had resistance. Tough greens, coarse grains, dried meats, unhulled barley. Nothing came easy. This constant need to grind, tear, and chew gave their facial muscles a daily workout, whether they liked it or not. You can almost hear your temporomandibular joint clench in sympathy. And here's the curious part. This ceaseless chewing did more than strengthen the jaw. It shaped the face, gave bones room to grow, created broad dental arches and straight rows of teeth without the need for orthodontists or colorful rubber bands. Modern studies have shown that hard chewing in early childhood influences the development of the jaw and skull, making wider mouths and reducing the risk of impacted or crooked teeth. Historians still argue whether Nubians had fewer orthodontic problems purely due to their diet, or if there was a genetic element at play too. But either way, it's hard to ignore the correlation. Their jaws developed fully because they were used fully. You think of your own soft toast and cereal mornings and realize your chewing efforts might top out around banana. Let's not forget baby food. In the modern world, babies get mashed peas and pureed carrots by the spoonful, sometimes but in Nubia, babies transitioned to real food, fast albeit in small, chewable pieces. There wasn't much coddling. The sooner those baby molars could get to work, the better. They joined the chewing chorus early, with roasted roots and mashed beans and firm fruit slices that had texture and resistance. This early engagement with rough foods meant that from a young age, Nubian children developed strong facial muscles and healthier oral posture. No thumb-sucking for comfort. No sippy cups filled with apple juice, slowly eroding their incisors. Just natural meals with built-in jaw therapy. And yes, their baby teeth eventually wore down too, but they often held on until those adult teeth came in strong and straight. Here's your fringe tidbit for tonight. Anthropologists studying Nubian remains have noted that many skulls show. B. Symmetrical dental wear. That's right, they chewed evenly, left and right, front and back. Unlike modern people, who often favor one side or develop odd patterns from habits like nail biting, chewing gum, or only eating soft foods. You've probably never thought about how you chew your pizza, but they didn't have a choice. If one side slacked off, the food would tell on you. It just wouldn't break down. This symmetrical wear pattern also hints at balanced facial development, and with more room for teeth to settle naturally, they had less overcrowding, fewer impactions, and surprise way, fewer cases of impacted wisdom teeth. Imagine that your face grows the way nature intended, and your molars show up on schedule without throwing a tantrum. You can practically hear your 19-year-old self groaning at the memory of post-surgery gauze and prescription mush. It's not just bones and teeth either. All that chewing helped tone the muscles around the mouth, the cheeks, the neck. Some experts even believe it contributed to clearer speech and stronger lungs. Because every time you chew for 10 straight minutes, you're not just rehearsing a performance of functional anatomy. Still, some debates linger. Were all Nubians this fortunate, or only certain regions with access to tougher diets and consistent food supplies? Did everyone benefit equally from these natural orthodontic miracles? Or were the wealthier classes eating softer meals that led to slightly different outcomes? It's hard to tell from bone fragments alone. What we do know is that, generally, their lifestyle promoted oral harmony. The way they grew up, what they ate, how they ate, it all worked together. Their jaws weren't pampered. They were trained. Not at the gym, but at the table, back in your imagined Nubian village. A young man sits cross-legged, carving through a piece of dried fish with his front teeth, then tearing it with his molars. It's not graceful, it's not fast, but it works. His jaw flexes like a lever. His face, though tired, is balanced and calm. You don't need an X-ray to know that everything under his skin has been doing its job since birth. You glance toward the fire again, where flatbread is puffing slightly on a hot stone. A grandmother chews slowly, grinding her meal with methodical precision. Her teeth are worn sure, but still functional, still rooted, still doing the work. And that's the difference. They used their teeth as tools every day. No excuses. No smoothies with protein powder. No cheat days. Just food that made them chew like it meant something. And somehow, it helped them build faces and lived strong enough to last. So maybe next time you reach for that microwaved macaroni, think about how much your jaw is missing out on. Maybe toss in something to crunch. Or maybe just imagine. Do yourself here a little longer, chewing beside the Nubians under the starlight. Slowly, steadily, quietly. Let the rhythm soothe you. Let the silence stretch. The stars shift overhead like ancient sequins sewn into a blanket of night, and you roll slightly in the soft Nubian sand, chin tilted toward the smoky trail rising from a dying hearth. Somewhere behind you, someone is cracking open a pod of acacia seeds. Crunch, crunch, that sound against so familiar here. Another reminder, this is a place of texture. Nothing is smooth, nothing is instant. And that brings us to something your modern world is often missing: natural abrasives. It sounds like a punishment, doesn't it? Natural abrasives. You imagine a mouthful of gravel or brushing with sidewalk chalk. But don't worry, this isn't torturing your gums. It's about subtle textures doing quiet work over time. Ancient Nubians didn't brush their teeth twice a day with sleek electric brushes, but they did spend their lives scrubbing their mouths without realizing it. Every meal was its own cleaning session. The whole grains they chewed, unrefined and coarse, especially sorghum and millet, the vegetables, tough and fibrous. Even their bread made from stone ground flour contained tiny flecks of grit from the grindstones used in preparation. You heard that right. They were unknowingly brushing their teeth with microscopic sandpaper. Now, you might be clutching your enamel in horror at that idea. Grit in your food. That sounds like a fast track to dental doom. But in moderate amounts, that abrasion actually helped smooth out plaque, polish surfaces, and prevent sticky buildup. Modern dentists call this the detergent effect foods that physically scrub the teeth as you eat them. The Nubians had a diet that naturally did this all day long. You probably drink your meals through a straw and call it productivity. Historians still argue whether the grit in Nubian bread caused long-term enamel loss, or whether it created a balance between polishing and wear. Some suggest their teeth were worn down earlier, but others argue that it was slow, even, and rarely led to pain or infection. Their enamel may have thinned, yes, but their mouths remained healthy, clean, and surprisingly functional deep into old age. Fringe tidbit for the night. Archaeologists have recovered thousands of grindstones from Nubian domestic sites, each showing signs of use so intense that grooves formed from decades of crushing grain. And because these stones were handheld, ground against clay or flat rock, the flour they produced was never truly clean. A little mineral grit always made it into the dough. You may not like the sound of that, but your teeth might actually send a thank you note. That subtle wherefrom everyday eating gave rise to a unique dental profile. Nubian teeth were often shorter with age, but not rotten. Imagine that, not chipped from cavities, not dark with infections, just gently worn down like river stones after a lifetime in the current. And this meant fewer hiding places for bacteria, fewer sharp edges to cause abscesses, fewer emergency tooth pullings by firelight. When your molars are constantly being planed by nature, you don't need a dentist with a degree. You need dinner. There's a kind of poetry to it, really. They didn't know about floss, but they didn't need it. Food didn't cling. Their meals were naturally cleansing. Even the act of drinking, pulling thick fermented beer from a gourd, or sipping fresh river water helped rinse away residue. And because their diet was low in sugar and high in texture, Bacterial colonies had a hard time finding a foothold. You peek again into the flickering firelight and watch a young woman press dough into patties on a hot stone. She doesn't measure, she just knows. Her hands move with a confidence passed down through centuries. Her bread will be dense, full of grain and grit-tanned. Yes, it might be a bit rough on the gums, but it's the kind of meal that keeps a mouth working well into old age. She hands a piece to a child who gnaws at it like a puppy with a stick. It's not easy to eat. It resists, but that's the point. Every bite is labor, and every bite is cleaning the very tools needed for tomorrow's bite. It's a cycle you might call inconvenient, but here it's wisdom passed in crumbs. Modern society, for all its shiny gadgets, often misses this elemental truth. Teeth are not just for smiling in photos or clenching through spreadsheets. They're tools of survival. And like any tool, they need friction to stay sharp or, in this case, smooth. The more we protect them with processed mush, the more vulnerable they become. But in Nubia, they embraced texture, and texture, in turn, protected them. You stretch a little in the warmth of your imagined camp, running your tongue across your imaginary, well-worn teeth. No sticky plaque, no fuzzy feeling after a snack, just the clean, sanded surfaces of a life lived close to the land. The wind picks up a bit, tugging gently at your robe. You hear a jackal far off, maybe hunting, maybe laughing. But here by the fire, it's safe, it's quiet, and your mouth, like your thoughts, feels oddly refreshed. The Nubian night stretches on, and the shadows around the fire grow longer, softer, like old memories you're just beginning to remember. And right about now, you're wondering something. If ancient Nubians had no dentists, no toothbrushes, no floss, how did they avoid bad breath? Surely, their mouths weren't just picture-perfect time capsules of sparkling enamel. Right, here's the oddly satisfying answer. They managed oral hygiene not with tools, but with habits. Habits so deeply woven into their daily lives that they barely noticed them. And one of those quiet habits, chewing sticks. Not plastic toothbrushes with minty stripes, but twigs specifically. Twigs from certain trees with antimicrobial properties. Welcome to the surprisingly advanced world of Nubian natural mouth care. Let's set the scene. You rise with the sun. Maybe stretch out your arms and groan a little. Shake the dust from your hair. Then you reach not for a tube of gel but for a fibrous little branch. The Salvadora persica tree, often called the toothbrush tree, grew across parts of Nubia and surrounding regions. Its twigs, when chewed on one end, formed a bristly little brush that cleaned teeth, freshened breath, and even fought bacteria. You didn't need fluoride. You had nature. Even today, in parts of Sudan and Egypt, this traditional practice survives. Chewing sticks have been studied for their effectiveness, and the results are kind of annoying because they work. They've been shown to kill harmful microbes, reduce plaque, and stimulate saliva production, which is your mouth's natural defense system. You might spend hundreds on whitening kits, but a Nubian elder could get the same effect with a stick and some good technique. Historians still argue whether the widespread use of these sticks was daily ritual or more occasional, tied to religion, buy, or status, or age. Some suggest they were used more during certain ceremonies, while others argue that their prevalence in burial sites hints at regular daily use. Whatever the case, their presence tells a quiet story. Oral care was a thing, even beer in the absence of minty foam. Fringe detail for tonight. Some archaeological digs in Nubia have found bundles of dried twigs buried alongside individuals carefully arranged beside arms or tucked into woven mats. It's possible these sticks were symbolic, like tools for the afterlife, or maybe just part of the carry-on luggage for eternity. Imagine being so proud of your dental hygiene that you insist on packing your toothbrush for the next world. That's commitment, and that's not the only weapon in the Nubian hygiene arsenal. Certain herbs were also used in ways that resemble modern mouth fresheners. Chewed leaves from plants like basil and fenugreek, both known in the region released. Aromatic oils that helped mask odors and possibly aided digestion. Add in the fact that their diet was low in sugar and high in savory grains, and you've got a naturally fresh breath cocktail. No tic-tacs required. You reach for one of those imaginary twigs now, turning it in your fingers. It's rough, knobby, fragrant. You bite the end and chew gently. The fibers split, revealing a coarse little brush. You run it along your molar, your tongue curling back to meet it. No buzzing electric handle, no timers, just the sound of bristles on teeth and the slow satisfaction of doing something simple, effective and ancient. Now, let's pivot slightly, because the mouth isn't just teeth. It's gums, tongue, breath, and the hidden little bacterial cities behind your lips. Modern oral science now admits what Nubians already practiced. Mechanical cleaning plus good saliva flow equals mouth health. Their chewing sticks provided both. Chewing released saliva, and saliva neutralized acids. It also carried enzymes that broke down food particles and prevented tooth decay. But it wasn't just the tools, it was the pace of eating. Nubians didn't rush meals while doom scrolling or watching reality shows. They sat, they chewed, they worked through their food slowly. This mechanical rhythm allowed full mastication, better digestion, and a prolonged exposure to saliva cleansing properties. You, on the other hand, probably inhale your dinner and blame your bloating on Mercury in retrograde. Back at the campfire, you watch a child gnawing on a twig just like yours, copying their elders. They chew. They spit gently into the sand and go back to chatting. Oral care wasn't private or clinical. Here it was social, habitual, even casual. No shame, no sterile bathroom cabinets, no dentist asking if you've been flossing regularly. Just quiet maintenance passed down through generations. That simplicity worked. When researchers examined ancient Nubian skulls, they found shockingly low rates of periodontal disease. Infections were rare. Gums showed signs of healthy attachment. Bone loss was minimal. All this in a population with no toothpaste ads, no mint commercials, no dental influencers whispering, "This changed my life." And yet remember, this wasn't perfection. Their teeth wore down, sometimes deeply. Their enamel got thin. Molars flattened like coins. But the surrounding tissues, the gums, the bones, they stayed remarkably stable. That's the difference between damage and wear. One is painful, the other is just the story of time. You tilt your head, imagining the quiet of a Nubian morning. Birds flutter past the reeds. The river glints silver. You chew gently, rhythmically on your invisible twig. It's not glamorous, but it works. You feel strangely proud of your imaginary mouth. The fire is just embers, now soft orange breaths. Under a cap of ashand, the Nubian night stretches like a yawn across the desert plain. You shift your weight again, half listening to the silence, and start to wonder, all this talk of chewing sticks and stone-ground bread, but what about their bones? Specifically, those bony roots inside their jaws. Were their jaws different, too? And yes, actually, yes, they were. Ancient Nubians had jaws like workbenches, sturdy, muscular, thick with bones, not chiseled for magazine covers, but built for endurance. Modern mouths, not so much. We sip smoothies, avoid crusts, bow meat into polite little cubes, and rarely chew anything tougher than toast. That makes us delicate. Our ancestors, the Nubians included, had to earn every calorie with jaw power, and it left a mark. Here's your mainstream historical fact. The average Nubian had a more pronounced jaw structure than we do today. Stronger mandibles, broader arches, teeth set in deeper, more stable sockets. Why? Because of constant chewing, hours per day, every single day, from toddlerhood until old age. The body adapted. The face shaped itself around the labor of eating. It's called masticatory stress, and it's not as painful as it sounds unless you're new to it. Basically, the more work your jaw does, the stronger it becomes. That means thicker bones, more developed chewing muscles, and wider dental arches. Nubians didn't suffer from the same crowding we do today. Their wisdom teeth often had plenty of room. No emergency extractions at 19. No ice packs and mushy soup. Their mouths, quite literally, grew into their jobs. Fringe tidbit. Some researchers believe the decline of chewing stress in the modern diet directly caused the rise of orthodontics. In other words, we have braces because we stopped chewing. That's a bit of a slap in the face, isn't it? You skip the crust, burn on your sandwich, and end up needing years of metal in your mouth. Meanwhile, Nubians chewed sorghum bread like it owed them money and smiled, straight as fence posts. Historians still argue whether this change was purely diet-based or also genetic. Were ancient populations born with wider jaws, or did their bodies adapt over time to the demands of hard chewing? Most agree it's likely both. but the environmental impact is clear. Even in just a few generations, when populations shift to softer, more refined diets, facial structures begin to change. The bones get narrower, teeth crowd, jaws weaken. We're literally reshaping our skulls with food choices. Now, lean into that image for a second. You holding your jaw gently with one hand, imagining it stronger, broader, built for action. Your tongue explores the imaginary wide hallway of a mouth that doesn't need braces, doesn't fear the dentist's drill, and has never known the horror of biting a hidden popcorn kernel. Back by the fire, the grinding stones are in motion again. A young woman with arms like braided rope presses sorghum against a curved slab of basalt. She's not smiling, but she's calm, steady. This is not a chore. This is how food is made. She doesn't realize that she's shaping the next generation's faces with every handful of flour. That this grit, this effort, this noise will ripple down through jawbones not yet born. You watch as she hands the ground meal to an older man, who adds it to a thick stew. He stirs with the slow patience of someone who's never once checked a microwave clock. There's no rushing this, and there's no need to. Their children will grow strong jaws, not because someone told them to chew, but because life made it necessary, and that necessity shaped their biology. You've got reminders on your phone just to hydrate. Imagine going back to basic snot in some Instagram cottagecore way. But truly, imagine eating food that takes effort, that resists, that makes you pause and work. Your jaw would ache at pursed, but then it would grow. And as it grew, so would the bones around it. Your mouth would widen, teeth would shift into perfect alignment, not through pressure from wires, but through the ancient whisper of muscle tugging gently at bone. It's not magic, it's not genetics, it's chewing. And let's not ignore the deeper layer, Nubian. Faces both, literally and culturally, were formed by these habits. Food wasn't just fuel, it was infrastructure. It shaped how people looked, how they aged, how they spoke, how they smiled. Every bite laid another brick in the architecture. Above the face, even the act of talking often overlooked relied on those same muscles. A well-chewed life made for clearer speech, stronger expression, and fewer age-related issues like jaw disorders. Nubians didn't need bite guards. They had bread that fought back. As the fire finally fades into cold gray stillness, you press your teeth together gently. Feel your own jaw softened by years of convenience. Could it ever become like theirs? Maybe, but only if you start tonight. Grab a stick, find a crust, bite with purpose, and let your face remember its old strength. You wake in the half-light, the faintest blush of dawn bleeding into the desert horizon. The fire's nothing now, just scattered sparks beneath ash, but the smells linger. Smoke, old millet, and the dust of ancient grindstones. Your jaw is still warm from the thought of all that chewing. And you start wondering, what about kids? Were Nubian children born with perfect teeth? Or did their dental journeys start rough like everyone else? Here's the thing, Even the youngest Nubians had surprisingly strong oral health, not because they were born magical, but because they were raised differently. From the moment their first little teeth poked through, their diet and habits trained their mouths for resilience. No processed baby food, no teething rings with frozen fruit inside. Just real, coarse, textured food from a young age, and it made all the difference. Let's start with your mainstream historical fact. Excavations at Nubian burial sites, particularly from the Christian period, roughly 500 to 1500 CE, reveal astonishing dental preservation in juvenile remains. Their teeth were strong, evenly spaced, and rarely had carious lesions, the fancy term for cavities, compared to modern kids who, let's face it, spend a decent chunk of their early years high on refined sugar. That's shocking dots, shocking dots. So, how did ancient Nubians manage this miracle? Well, part of the answer lies in what they didn't do. No sugar. Not just no added sugar, but literally no access to refined sweeteners. Honey was rare and expensive. There was no soda, no candy, no juice boxes, no sneaky granola bars, pretending to be healthy. Their idea of a treat, maybe a handful of sweet dates, if they were lucky, or a slightly overripe fig. And that brings us to tonight's quirky tidbit. Some Nubian mothers weaned their babies onto a soft porridge made from fermented sorghum and goat's milker mix so tangy and rough that modern babies would probably scream at the taste. But this mash, thick and fibrous, encouraged gum development, chewing strength, and salivary health. That's right to your toddler's teething crackers. No match for ancient Nubian breakfast paste. Historians still argue whether this early dietary discipline was a conscious dental strategy or just a byproduct of necessity. Did they know it was good for teeth? Or did it just happen to work out that way because there was nothing soft or sweet to offer? Most researchers lean toward the latter. But either way, the outcome was the same. Their mouths got strong before problems could even start. Imagine this: a Nubian child, maybe 3 or 4, crouched beside their mother at the millstone. They're not playing with toys, they're helping. Little hands guiding rough kernels into the stone's groove, watching the grain break down into something usable. That dust gets everywhere, even on their food. But instead of being harmful, it ends up doing something useful, grinding down developing teeth into gentle curves, shaping molars for the long haul. You chew the air absently now, imagining the gritty flavor of ancient porridge on your tongue. Not exactly a sugar rush, but strangely satisfying. Let's zoom in for a moment. One of the more intriguing discoveries from dental anthropology in Nubia is that across all age groups, there were very few signs of dental abscesses or infections. You'd expect to see more of that in pre-modern populations, especially in children, but it's just not there. The few cavities that do show up are usually shallow, worn smooth by a lifetime of grinding, like dents in a well-loved tool. Now, modern pediatric dentistry. It's a war zone. fluoride varnishes, baby root canals, X-rays at 6-month intervals. We throw everything at the problem after it starts. The Nubians, they skipped the problem altogether, not through genius, through grit. You picture a little boy grinning through a mouthful of coarse bread, no front teeth yet, gums stained from dates. His teeth won't see a dentist. They won't get polish or sealant, but they'll serve him through battles, through hunger, through old agent when they're buried. Centuries later, they'll still be there, silent and intact. You might be thinking, but isn't that kind of rough? No sweets at all. And yes, in a way, it was. Childhood in Nubia wasn't cushioned, but it was durable. Children were folded into adult life, early working, grinding, fetching water, preparing meals. And through that work, they learned resilience, not just in spirit, but in bone. Their teeth told the story. That story, it's one of adaptation, not perfection. Not every child had gleaming enamel. Some did show signs of enamel hyperplasias, those faint ridges on teeth that form when a child undergoes stress or malnutrition. But even with those challenges, the overall pattern was stunning. Fewer cavities, less inflammation, health that lasted, and here's one last image for the road. A mother pressing a soft plantain into her toddler's mouth, not to soothe, but to strengthen. The child works the fruit, cheeks puffed like little sails, jaw shifting side to side. No screens, no music, just the sounds of chewing, breathing, learning. The start of a long journey of strong teeth and quiet grit. You chew, again nothing in your mouth, just muscle memory from the story. And you wonder what your dentist would say if you swapped your toothpaste for tree bark, your diet for millet mush. Would they be horrified or impressed? The morning sun climbs lazily, stretching fingers of gold over the Nile's edge, and you sit with it, still chewing imaginary millet like some kind of enlightened archaeologist. But now your thoughts drift again, this time to the water. If the Nubians had tough grains and fibrous food, they must have had something to wash it down. What were they drinking? And more importantly, did that affect their teeth too? Absolutely, it did. Water and dental health go hand in hand. And in ancient Nubia, the Nile was more than just a river. It was a lifeline. It was their bath, their pantry, their road, and their drinking source. And that water, well, it had a little secret. Let's drop your mainstream historical fact early. Nubian water sources, especially those tapped from natural wells and underground aquifers, were often rich in natural fluoride. Yep, the very same stuff modern dentists insist on pumping into toothpaste. And municipal water systems was already flowing freely through Nubia thousands of years ago, not in some overprocessed, synthetic form, just natural fluoride, dissolved gently in the mineral-rich groundwater from Nubia's limestone bedrock. Now, it wasn't consistent across every site. Some Nubian regions had more fluoride than others, but where it was present, it left a distinct marked teeth with smooth enamel, resistant to decay, strong enough to last decades under stress. No dental clinics, no insurance premiums, No awkward. On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is the pain? Just good old-fashioned chemistry delivered straight from the earth. Now, for your quirky tidbit of the night. In a few cases, Nubian teeth actually show too much fluoride, creating faint striations or discoloration in the enamel. This is called dental fluorosis. And while it can make teeth look a little mottled, it doesn't usually weaken them. If anything, it makes them even harder. So yes, in some parts of Nubia, children accidentally overdosed on Mother Nature's fluoride rinse. Your dentist wishes you had that problem. You picture a group of Nubians crouched at a shallow well water, sloshing into clay jars. The air thick with heat and goatsop. They sip with cupped hands, letting the coolness settle against their tongues, unaware that each swallow is a tiny act of protection. No synthetic mouthwash required, just river water filtered through time and stone. Historians still argue whether Nubians understood the health effects of their water. Did they know it was good for teeth? Or did they simply drink what was available and reap the quiet rewards? There's no ancient scroll saying, "Good news, Kidzao groundwater is enriched with calcium fluoride." But some scholars think the patterns of settlement favoring specific wells or aquifers might hint at an intuitive understanding of water's benefits, even if they couldn't explain it scientifically. And while we're here, think of your own relationship with water. You, right now, probably sipping something filtered, flavored, or fixed. Maybe it's got electrolytes. Maybe it came from a fridge with a glowing digital spout. Maybe it cost $3 and promised to restore your soul. The Nubians, they had one option, what the earth gave them. And it was often better for their teeth than anything we've manufactured since now. Let's visit a moment buried deep in the sand at the archaeological site of Kulabnati, a now dry island near the second cataract of the Nile. Researchers examined hundreds of skeletons buried between 500 and 1400 CE. Many of the skulls showed incredible dental preservation, minimal cavities, low rates of periodontal disease, and signs of enamel that had resisted both time and trauma. Was it diet? Definitely. Was it genetics? Maybe. But the water, that might have been the unspoken hero. In areas near Kulabnati, underground water flowed through mineral-dense rock, bringing with it a trace element that, millennia later, would become the poster child of modern dentistry. You breathe deeply now, imagining that mineral taste on your tongue, the kind that lingers after a desert sip, a little metallic, a little chalky, not glamorous, but health-giving. The irony is almost comedic. Today, many of us brush twice daily with fluoride toothpaste, swish mouthwash, chew sugar-free, gum, drink tap water pumped full of additives and still end up with fillings. The Nubians, they drank from a rock-filtered stream, chewed tree twigs, and called it a day. And somehow, they won. You lean back, squinting toward the imaginary Nile, watching figures in linen robes fill their jars, carry them balanced on heads, like tall thoughts. Their lives weren't easy. but their mouths unseen beneath the layers of time tell stories of balance, of effort rewarded, of elements aligning without anyone needing a lab coat. Tonight, let that image settle over you like a second blanket. You, standing on the dusty edge of history, dipping your hands into a cool, ancient spring. The minerals hug your teeth invisibly, and your breath comes slower. The world outside might be chaos, but in this quiet desert life, even water knows how to protect you. The sun now sits high and heavy above the Nubian hills, and the air around you begins to shimmer heat, rippling like silk. You let your eyes follow a path of dust, winding toward the horizon, where people in white linen robes move slowly, purposefully. They aren't just fetching water or preparing grain today. No, now they're gathering something else entirely, something stranger, plants. Yes, you're about to wander into one of the most overlooked chapters of ancient dental care, chewing sticks, or as archaeologists like to call them, natural toothbrushes. But let's not pretend this was a well-orchestrated dental hygiene routine. You're not about to discover a Nubian Colgate ad carved into stone. What you are going to find is something way better. Mainstream historical fact first. The use of chewing sticks, thin twigs or roots, used to clean the teeth, has been recorded in many ancient civilizations. But among Nubians, archaeological evidence suggests that certain plant species were used not only for oral hygiene, but also for their antimicrobial property. These weren't just tooth scrubbers. They were nature's little pharmacy kits, disguised as humble sticks. Now, picture yourself waking in the dusty courtyard of a Nubian homestead. You stretch, yawn, and without a mirror, without a bathroom, you grab a thin root from a woven basket near the door. It's not fancy. It doesn't taste minty. But as you chew one end, the fibers splay open like a bristle brush, and you gently scrub your teeth. Morning breath neutralized, gums stimulated, plaque handled at least enough for the day. The most famous of these plant-based cleaners is the Salvadora persica, commonly called the toothbrush tree, used across ancient Africa, Arabia, and parts of Asia. Its twigs are naturally rich in fluoride, silica, and antibacterial compounds. Historians still argue whether Nubians deliberately selected this plant for dental purposes or stumbled upon it through trial and error. But given their long-standing use of herbs and roots for other medicinal purposes, it's very possible they knew exactly what they were doing, ready for a quirky tidbit. Scientists studying ancient Nubian skulls have found unusual directional wear patterns on teeth wear that suggests brushing or scraping with twigs rather than just grinding from food. Even more fascinating, in some sites, archaeologists have unearthed bundles of twigs near burial grounds, as though these simple tools were considered essential enough to carry into the afterlife. Forget golden necklaces. You're taking your toothbrush with you. You imagine a teenaged Nubian boy, bored with his chores, idly chewing on a twig. He doesn't know he's part of a preventive healthcare revolution. He just likes the taste, The bitter flavor numbs his gums slightly, wakes him up. His mother nods approvingly, less out of scientific validation, and more because it's what her grandmother always did. And just like that, you're inside an unbroken chain of wisdom passed mouth to mouth, root to root. The beauty of these chewing sticks lies not just in their function, but in their frequency. You didn't just brush your teeth once in the morning and call it a day. Nubians, like many in the ancient world, carried sticks with them, used them while walking, used them after meals, used them like you might chew gum absent-mindedly. Their oral care was a lifestyle, not a chore. You pause here, mentally comparing that to your twice-a-day, 2-minute regimen. Add in flossing if you're ambitious. Now imagine brushing your teeth continuously throughout the day with a tool that also disinfects your mouth. You start to realize this wasn't primitive. It was brilliant. And there's a tactile satisfaction to it too. You can almost feel the rough wood against your molars, the slightly bitter taste of sap, the earthy aroma wafting up from your hands. There's no mint, no artificial sparkle, just something real, something that works. Modern science now confirms that many of these plants contain natural antiseptics. One study found that chewing sticks from specific African shrubs were as effective as commercial toothbrushes at removing plaque and preventing gum disease. The kicker: these twigs also promoted saliva production, which further cleansed the mouth. Again, no mouthwash required. Imagine carrying one of those today. You're in a work meeting, nodding politely, when you pull out a twig and begin brushing with it. You'd probably get escorted out by security, but in Nubia, that would have made perfect sense. And speaking of social norms, it wasn't just a solo activity. Nubian oral care had a communal aspect. People shared knowledge of which twigs worked best. Some families even had favorite trees passed down like heirlooms. This one here, child, your grandfather used it before the harvest. A toothbrush with a family story. Now that's heritage. So let's wrap this section in that same spirit. Picture you sitting under an acacia tree, sun dappling your face, carving the bark from a fresh twig. You chew until the fibers fan out. You start brushing. It's slow, meditative. No mirror needed. Just the rhythm of your breath, the taste of the earth, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing your ancestors figured this out long before dentists had degrees. Your teeth feel cleaner already, don't they? The sun begins its slow descent, casting long shadows across the sandy hills of Nubia, and you find yourself walking beside a group of villagers returning from the fields. The mood is quiet but content, their baskets full of sorghum and wild herbs, and every now and then one of them pauses to greet an elder resting beneath a shady ledge. As the village draws closer, something catches your eye. An old woman sitting by a clay hearth, grinding something between stones. You draw nearer, curious. She's not making flour. She's making medicine or something like it. Tonight, your sleepy journey takes a deeper turn, not just into teeth, but into the gums beneath them, the breath between them, the body around them. Because the Nubians didn't just eat healthy and drink lucky water. They also had a rich, sometimes surprising tradition of using local medicine plants, minerals, poultices, and rituals to care for their mouths. And when something went wrong, they did something about it. Let's start with your mainstream historical fact. Archaeological evidence shows that Nubians used medicinal plants for both internal and external treatments. From toothaches to gum infections, they turned to roots, ashes, and resins to manage pain and swelling. In fact, certain Nubian burial sites have revealed residues of plant compounds near the jaws and teeth of the deceased, suggesting targeted applications, primitive mouthwashes, pastes, and even medicinal chewing gums. But here comes your quirky tidbit. Some Nubian communities used ground charcoal, not just for cooking, but as a tooth cleanser and mild abrasive. Charcoal would be mixed with local herbs or water and rubbed on the teeth, likely using fingers or a twig. Sound familiar? Today's fancy activated charcoal toothpastes are basically marketing ancient Nubian tricks in sleek tubes. Except back then, there were no influencers, just a good reason to keep your breath passable during communal storytelling nights. Now, let's poke at a mystery. Historians still argue whether Nubians understood the link between gum disease and systemic illness. There are patterns, even of oral health being connected to larger healing practices. For instance, Nubian healers often combined mouth treatments with digestive tonics, as though they sensed a relationship between the gut and the gums. Was this proto-holistic medicine? Was it coincidence? Or did long observation teach them what science is only recently confirming? You picture a young man with an aching molar, wincing beside a fire. His mother, a healer in her own right, crushes dried acacia leaves into powder, stirs them with river water, and applies the paste along his gum line with a bit of cloth. He doesn't resist. He knows this remedy. He's felt its sting and relief dash before dot. Some scholars speculate that Nubians may have even practiced early forms of oral surgery. There are skulls bearing marks, clean ones, not from violence, that suggest teeth may have been intentionally removed to stop pain or infection. We don't have written manuals from these people, but the evidence whispers nonetheless. They did something when the pain got bad enough. They didn't just suffer through it. Imagine them under a palm-thatched roof, holding someone still, using sharp bone tools or even heated metal, hands steady in the flicker of lamplight. There was no anesthesia, just courage, experience, and maybe a calming chant. You wince slightly, then exhale. These people didn't flinch from pain. They worked with it, softened it, soothed it where they could. Herbs like myrrh, juniper, and fenugreek were often used to fight swelling and reduce bacteria. They were rubbed into sore gums, boiled for rinses, or even inhaled during steam rituals meant to cleanse both body and spirit. This wasn't just hygiene, it was belief. It was healing woven with story, medicine braided with myth, and it wasn't all herbs. Sometimes it was symbolic amulets worn to protect the mouth, prayers said to stop infection from spreading into the wind, as one translated incantation suggests. Today you might call it placebo, but to them it was power, it was protection. And have you're dealing with molar pain and no pharmacy. A little extra belief goes a long way. Now, let's zoom back in on you. Imagine sitting in that village, watching the healers' practiced hands. You feel the heat of the fire here, the hiss of water poured onto stones. The paste is thick, earthy, and smells faintly of eucalyptus. You close your eyes as she pats it along your sorghum. It's strange, sharp at first, then, somehow, calming. You don't know what's in it, but you believe in it. Modern medicine often divides body parts into specialties: oral health, gut health, mental health. But ancient Nubians didn't do that. They treated the body like a village, each part connected to another. Mouth pain wasn't just mouth pain. It was a warning, a story the body was trying to tell. And they listened tonight as your breathing slows and your body drapes itself into the mattress like fabric on stone. Let yourself drift into that Nubian philosophy that even something as small as a sore tooth deserves attention. That healing doesn't always come from a bottle. Sometimes it comes from bitter herbs, burned wood, and the quiet knowledge passed from hand to hand. The evening settles across the Nile like a silk curtain drawn slowly, and the sky above Nubia shifts from bright bronze to a deep, star-scattered velvet. You move through the village now with lighter steps, softer thoughts. There's music in the aerodrums, hollow gourds, voices humming together like bees in rhythm. It's the end of a long day, and the community gathers not just to eat or laugh or rest, but to share, to exchange news, stories, and occasionally observations about strange ailments or who's complaining about another sorghum. Because here's something surprising. Ancient Nubians didn't treat dental health as a private issue. In many ways, it was communal. Your breath, your pain, your smile, it all reflected on your family, your house, your people. And as we enter this softer corner of the story, we come to a thread that ties so many of their oral health habits together: collective care. Let's open with your mainstream historical fact. There's evidence that Nubian society emphasized health through shared routines and practices. This included communal food preparation, shared herbal knowledge, and even collective roles in healing rituals. It wasn't a see the doctor alone kind of culture. It was more of a let's figure this out together under the moonlight type of deal. You wander past the open fire pit and see a group of children sitting cross-legged, each holding bare little twigs, more of those chewing sticks, passed down from a basket in the center. An elder leads them in song while they chew, perhaps more play than pedagogy. But you realize something deeper. They're learning through rhythm, through mimicry, through togetherness. No lectures needed, just time, trust, and tradition. Here's a quirky tidbit to savor. Some Nubian communities believed that smiling with clean, healthy teeth was a form of spiritual hospitality. A healthy mouth wasn't just practical, it was respectful. Elders would chide younger folks, not for being unkempt, but for letting the village shame itself through your breath. Now that's motivation to brush. You chuckle at the thought. Imagine if your dentist guilt-tripped you with your letting your ancestors down, Kevin. But in Nubia, this made sense. Health was identity. Dental hygiene was legacy. When people smiled at a visitor or laughed during a ceremony, they weren't just revealing teeth. They were showing respect to the community that raised them. And that brings us to another layer. One historians still argue about: were there designated oral health specialists in ancient Nubia? Some skeletal remains show consistent dental work, clean extractions, patterns of repair, signs of repeated care. Too consistent, some scholars say, to be random or occasional. Maybe there were individuals within the community, healers, herb grinders, who focused more often on the mouth than others. Not quite dentists in white coats, but more like village tooth sages. You imagine one such person, old, wise, missing a few teeth themselves, yet still revered. People bring their children for checkups that are more song than science, more leaf than latex. The healer presses a palm to a child's cheek, whispers a prayer, then grinds a pinch of dried mint with honey and sand. It's messy, it's sticky, but somehow it works. Not always, but often enough to matter. This collective approach extended beyond treatment to prevention. The whole village would fast together on certain days, not for health fads, but for seasonal or spiritual reasons, and these fasts had side effects. Less food meant less wear on the teeth. Less sugar, natural or otherwise, meant fewer cavities. Think about that. The entire rhythm of the calendar played a role in how long your molars held up. Now pause with that for a moment. How modern life isolates every little thing. Health apps, solo brushing, appointments you sneak off to. Compare that to Nubia, where your auntie might hand you a salt rock mid-conversation and remind you to rub it across your gums. Not because she's nagging, but because that's what people do. They take care of one another's smiles in this shared environment. Oral health wasn't just about tools, it was about daily choices. Meals made from fibrous grains, long hours, chewing, the absence of processed sweets. These things weren't designed with dental science in mind, but the result was cleaner, stronger teeth. And when someone did fall ill, the burden didn't fall solely on them. It became a village concern. In fact, oral health even showed up in folklore. Some stories warned children about spirits that would sneak into your mouth if you ate without washing your hands. Others described glowing ancestors who could see your teeth from the stars and judge you for laziness. Silly, maybe, but those tales had staying power. Try forgetting a lesson like that when it's told with dancing shadows and clapping hands. So, what do you take from all this? Maybe it's that dental care doesn't have to be lonely. Maybe it's the reminder that humans across all time and terrain thrive better when we help each other chew, grin, heal, and laugh. And maybe, just maybe, we've lost something when we traded community for convenience. So, as you rest now, your jaw softening, your lips curling into that lazy, near sleep. Smile. Let yourself feel part of their community. A village where even the simplest actuing a stick, rinsing with herbs, humming during a cleaning ritual is a thread in the great woven cloth of togetherness. The fire crackles softly behind you, and someone passes you a twig with a wink. Your breath smells like mint and smoke. You shift slightly, feeling the warmth of the fire fading behind you as the cool Nubian night settles like a soft blanket across the land. The breeze carries the scent of river reeds and distant embers, and your footsteps crunch lightly on sand and gravel as you wander once more, this time not toward people, but toward silence. You pass the sleeping goats, the bundled baskets, the low mud walls, and come to the edge of a familiar scene. An old cemetery, quiet under the stars. Here, the bones of ancient Nubians whisper their final secrets, and you're ready to listen. Tonight, tour, we explore how science confirmed what the living once practiced in rhythm and tradition. Because it wasn't until modern researchers began examining ancient Nubian skeletal remains, particularly the skulls and jaws, that the truth about their remarkable oral health fully emerged. And what they found, well, let's just say, your 21st century gums might want to take notes. Let's start, as always, with one mainstream historical fact. Studies of Nubian remains from sites like Simna and Kaza Ibrim show that many individuals had minimal tooth decay, strong enamel, and relatively little evidence of gum disease. In an era where toothbrushes were made of twigs and toothpaste came from whatever you found nearby, that's astonishing. Particularly when compared to modern populations, many of whom, despite all the technology and dentist visits, still struggle with cavities, erosion, and inflammation. Now, here's your quirky tidbit. Scientists found traces of tetracycline D antibiotic in the bones of ancient Nubians. That's right. They were likely consuming a natural form of it, unknowingly, through their diet. Some of their fermented gruels, especially those made with grains contaminated by Streptomyces bacteria, created low doses of tetracycline. Essentially, they were microdosing antibiotics long before the word even existed. And one of the primary benefits, better gum health, fewer infections, stronger immunity, all by accident, or maybe by tradition that remembered what worked. You sit near a cluster of burial mounds, letting this sink in. The bones buried beneath your feet once carried people with wide, white smiles, farmers, warriors, mothers, scribes, and their jaws, preserved by centuries of arid earth and respectful rituals, now speak for them. The molars show where but healthy were. The gaps between teeth are smooth, suggesting they were plucked or fell out naturally, not ripped apart by decay. Now, here's a scholarly mystery for your sleepy mind. Historians still argue whether Nubians intentionally fermented their grains to produce medicinal benefits, or whether this was simply a lucky byproduct of their cooking methods. Some suggest they might have known in some intuitive level that certain preparations made people feel better. Others argue it was coincidence, wrapped in ritual. But the evidence is in their bones. Buy, and it glows. You picture researchers in sterile labs, peering into microscopes, adjusting bone samples under gentle lights. They don't just see enamel, they see a story, a rhythm. They trace mineral composition and dental calculus, unlocking tiny fragments of ancient meals, bits of sorghum, traces of dates, and even the ghost of an herb once chewed before sleep. They run their reports, compare their charts, sound blink in disbelief. Because compared to similar populations in Egypt, Greece, and even Rome, Nubian teeth are better, cleaner, healthier, less wrecked by time. How? Maybe it was the chewing sticks. Maybe the herbal rinses. Maybe the lack of processed sugars. Or maybe, just maybe, it was the slow life, the communal meals, the rhythm of sun and shadow that didn't push the body into chaos and cortisol. There's something almost tender in the idea that you can learn from bones, that ancient mouths still have something to say. And when you pair those scientific findings with the oral traditions, the songs, the grinding stones, and the smoke-scented huts, you begin to understand. The Nubians weren't just lucky, they were attentive. They listened to their bodies, they watched, they remembered. You trace a finger along a jagged stone, and imagine a skull resting here, once wrapped in linen, buried with care. A child, perhaps, who never knew what sugar was, or an elder whose chewing stick was passed down like a family relic. Their teeth held their stories, their smiles held their secrets, and in a world obsessed with novelty and new gadgets and whitening strips, maybe it's worth remembering. Sometimes the best answers are the oldest ones. Sometimes a twig and a prayer and a slow meal under stars do more for you than 10-step routines and plastic floss. Your shoulders drop as you lean back, letting the cool air graze your skin. The wind moves gently through the acacia trees, and somewhere far off, a jackal calls lonely but not threatening. Just there, like you, listening. You close your eyes and let yourself drift for a moment, not forward, but downward, into the ground, past the dust, into the earth, where memory lies in calcium and enamel, and you smile, because the mouths that once loved here still have something to say. The moonlight drips in silver ribbons across the sand now, and you've wandered back toward the riverbank, where the reeds dance slowly in the night wind. It's quieter here, save for the gentle lap of water and the occasional ripple of fish just beneath the surface. You crouch at the edge, looking at your own reflection, soft, half blurred, slightly distorted, but you can't help noticing how you smile, and in that hazy, sleepy grin, you carry with you centuries of wisdom. Because tonight, you've been following a trail of stories told not by scrolls or statues, but by teeth. And as the fire of Section 14 glows gently to life, we return once more to the daily rhythm of Nubian life, this time through the tools and rituals that supported those famously healthy mouths. You scoop a palmful of cool water, rinse your lips, and think about the everyday objects that once lay scattered here. Gourd bowls, grinding stones, red baskets filled with herbs and twigs. Nothing fancy, no titanium tools, no blinking lights or ultrasonic anything. Just simple things, touched by hands, shaped by centuries, and guided by instinct. Let's begin with one mainstream fact. Archaeological digs at ancient Nubian sites have uncovered a variety of practical dental tools, mostly made from local wood, bone, or plant fibers. These included not only chewing sticks, but also flat scrapers likely used to clean plaque or food bits from between teeth and pestle and mortars. Sets dedicated specifically to mixing dental powders. Some were smooth from years of use. Others bore decorative carvings, suggesting they weren't just tools, but tokens passed down, cherished, perhaps even personalized. And here comes your fringe delight. Some Nubians are believed to have carried miniature pouches, leather or linen filled with tooth amulets. Yes, tiny charms believed to protect against toothache or ward off what they called mouth spirit. These were often crafted from ivory, polished stone, or animal teeth, worn around the neck or hung near the sleeping mat. Were they medicinal? Maybe not in the scientific sense, but comfort is a kind of medicine too. You smile again, imagining a young Nubian mother tying a tiny crocodile tooth into a pouch for her child, whispering blessings as the child falls asleep. A ritual, yes, but also a kind of lullaby. One part comfort, one part protection, and all wrapped in love. As always. Historians argue whether some of these rituals were spiritual in nature or had genuine medical intent. Did they think they were curing cavities with chants, or were they simply weaving healing into the fabric of daily life? There's no final answer. What's clear is that they weren't passive. They did things. They rubbed crushed herbs on gums, brewed mouth rinses from neem and salt, and even painted cracked molars with sticky plant resinatures, earliest dental filler. You find a flat stone and sit for a moment, just breathing. The air is thick with scent papyrus dust, maybe even the faint linger of crushed mint leaves. You run your fingers through the sand, picturing all the little tools buried beneath, each one touched. Lived long ago. These weren't ancient people in the abstract. They were parents teaching kids to scrub their tongues. They were friends handing each other a twig with a laugh. They were elders giving advice that started with back when I had all my teeth. One especially fascinating tool found in Nubian grave sites was a small double-ended stick one, end roughened like a brush, the other flattened into a paddle. Think of it as the Swiss Army knife of ancient dental hygiene. The brush side cleaned. The paddle side may have applied herbal salves or pressed grain paste into crevices. Multi-use, biodegradable, and totally intuitive. Somewhere a modern minimalist would swoon. And what about the dental powders? Oh, those were a mix of genius and guesswork. Sand, yes, but very fine. Charcoal, absolutely. crushed cloves, dried flowers, powdered bones. The ingredient lists were long and often poetic. Some formulas might even have included burnt bread, boar dried fish scales. A strange combo, perhaps, but the abrasiveness helped scrub, while the aromatics soothed. Not quite minty fresh, but let's be honest, Tour toothpaste isn't made of roses either. You picture an old Nubian healer grinding away at dawn, humming to themselves as the morning sun spills across the mat. They don't need measuring spoons. They know the recipe by feel, and when the powder is ready, they hand it off with a nod, no prescription, no barcode. Just a handful of history in a pinch of dust. And in these tools and powders, you see a greater truth. Oral health wasn't a reaction, it was a rhythm. Something you did every morning, like breathing. Something woven into prayer, into family, into community. You didn't wait for a problem, you tended to your mouth the way you tended to the fire, with regular care, so it wouldn't grow out of control. There's a kind of peace in that. No urgency, no appointments, just a slow, earthy kind of wisdom that told you, take care of your mouth, and your words will be clear, your food will be sweet, and your laughter will last longer. You take a slow breath and feel the night growing thicker, softer. The stars seem to hang lower now, like beads on a string. And in the silence, you almost hear the scrape of twig on tooth, the soft rhythm of ancient brushing, a chorus of lives brushing in sync. You rise, brushing sand from your hands, and begin to walk again, feet light, heart full, and teeth just slightly cleaner in sympathy. Because somewhere inside, you're carrying their rituals now, their tools, their calm, dot. And as you head toward the final chapter of this Nubian lullaby, you can't help but feel a little closer to the past, a little quieter, a little more at home. You walk now in silence, the edge of sleep tugging gently at your senses, like a warm hand leading you to bed. The wind has softened, the river flows slower, and the stars are light. Ancient lanterns strung across the Nubian sky, watching you, waiting patiently for you to hear one last thing. Because tonight, there's still one more secret the ancient Nubians want to whisper before you drift off completely. It's not about tools, or chewing sticks, or antibiotics. It's about what they believed their smiles actually meant. You find yourself near a crumbling temple wall, half swallowed by sand, partly open to the sky. Moonlight rests on its stones, revealing faint carvings, figures with wide faces, soft eyes, and yes, teeth. Not scowls or grimaces, but calm expressions. Mouths just slightly open in a serene, knowing smile. It's easy to miss, but once you see it, you can't unsee it. Nubian smiles weren't just health indicators. They were symbols. So here's one final mainstream historical fact. In both Meroitic and earlier Nubian art, smiling figures appear more often than in many other ancient artistic traditions. While Egyptian statues were often stern or enigmatic, Nubian carvings, especially those tied to fertility, music, and the harvest show faces in gentle, unforced joy. It suggests something deeper, a cultural value placed not only on what teeth could do, but on how they could reflect the soul. And here's your oddball fringe nugget. Some Nubian burial sites contain skulls with decorative inlays or intentional dental modifications, like carved notches or decorative grooves. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate aesthetics, perhaps status symbols, or a kind of personal branding smiles that told the world, this is who I am. You don't do that to teeth unless teeth matter. Historians still debate whether these modifications were purely aesthetic or carried spiritual weight. Were they rites of passage, a way to identify a clan member, or a deeper belief that one's mouth where words begin, where breath meets sound, was the seat of identity? The jury's still out, but the possibilities are tantalizing. You crouch, now brushing your fingers over the cool stones. Your mind drifts back over everything you've heard tonight. The twigs, the herbs, the fermented gruel, the powders, the bones, the rituals. And through it all, a theme rises like morning mist. Respect, not just for teeth, but for the mouth itself. For the act of speaking, of eating, of smiling, for the human connection that passes through every shared bite and every laugh. They understood something that modern life forgets, rushing from one appointment to the next, popping gum and booking whitening strips online. They knew that health isn't just a checklist, it's a rhythm, a relationship, a smile born not of photo filters, but of balance between diet, spirit, body, and land. You stand slowly, the horizon now barely visible. The village is asleep. The river hums its lullaby, and somewhere deep below your feet, the ancient Nubians are still smiling quiet, calm, at peace. So you turn and begin the final walk back, past the fire pit, past the clustered huts, back to the quiet mat where this whole dream began. You lie down, the sand warm beneath you, the sky infinite above, and before sleep fully carries you away, here's one last thought to tuck under your pillow. Your body carries the memory of every meal your ancestors ever ate. It holds their laughter in your bones, their habits in your cells, and maybe, just maybe, their smiles in your sleep. Word, count, 1031, now breathe slower. Let the story soften. Let the river fade to a hush. Let the winds of Nubia retreat to the quiet corners of your mind, where ancient reeds sway gently in the breeze, and old songs hum without words. Your body knows the rhythm by now, the slow, steady heartbeat of a land once ruled by silence and sun. You've walked through centuries tonight, felt the grainy hush of chewing sticks against enamel, listened to bones speak beneath the earth, and watched smiles bloom in stone and spirit. And now you rest. The fire has gone out. The grinding stones are quiet. The tools are tucked away. The powders sealed in gourd jars. And the last reed mat has been rolled up for sleep. Pool all around you. The ancient world yawns wide, relaxed, unhurried. Let your jaw unclench. Let your breath drift like sand in the desert wind. Let every sound recede, one grain at a time, until all that's left is the gentle hum of time passing, soft and steady. You are safe here, in this hush. You are welcome here, among the echoes. And in the quiet, you smile a small, sleepy, knowing smile, just like the Nubians did sleep now. The past will keep watch. End of script. Sweet dreams.